I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners would like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to start with a moment of silence, please. Roll call, start with Commissioner Culberson.
Here.
Here.
Cos.
Here.
I am present. Commissioner Shimke.
Here.
And Commissioner Irvin. For the record, all 5 commissioners are present. I'd like to open up the public comment portion of our meeting. Anyone from the public wishing to speak, please come forward and state your name. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to administrative business.
I have a couple of items today. First of all, the treasurer has asked that I remind everybody that the treasurer's office is closed on December 31st as they conduct the end-of-year business. Their staff will be there, but the offices will be closed. So just ask that I remind you that. And then I have Aaron Yoakum here today to talk about the property we acquired across the street. The intent was to have that building removed and eventually become a parking lot. He's received a couple of proposals on removal, and he wanted to go ahead and present those today.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Okay, so we had written a scope of services for either a relocation or demolition of the 319 Walnut Street property that you guys had acquired. No contractors came forward on relocation. I did have 3 contractors come to a mandatory pre-bid meeting for demolition. We received 2 qualifying bids, one of which was the low bid, also a local, was Remco Demolition for $12,320. I've checked with Janet. She recommended that it came out of Courthouse General Fund, and we can move forward on removing that property and getting the ground prepped for a possible parking lot later.
Commissioners have any questions? We all assumed it'd be demoed, I'm imagining. I did. Then, there's no any further questions of Aaron, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Remco demolition proposal in the amount not to exceed $12,320.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Is there any other administrative business this time?
Uh,
I'll hand this out. Oh, you need somebody to sign that? All right. Commissioner Culberson and myself had a conference call with Mid-America Regional Council last week on the 152 bridge, and I got a follow-up letter on that. I'll pass it down to Mike. Of what their recommendations were. So. Basically, to sum it up, just continue with the planning phases of it. Anyway.
So it's pretty much the same thing that they verbally
Right.
said.
Right, it's just a follow-up email from our conference call.
Because sometimes once we ask them for it in writing, we get a different.
No,
Thanks,
it's exactly.
Okay, so they're still positive about it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So anyways, any other administrative business? Then we'll move on to consent agendas. Commissioners had a chance to look at the consent agenda. Any questions, concerns? any of the items on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I just had a couple of quick questions on the check register. On page 6, I was just curious, the Gilman Bell Legal Service, what that was in.
That's the temporary note issuance.
Yeah.
Oh, it was, okay. Well, then I saw the one from Stiefel, and so I associated that with the bond issuance, but,
That is also.
okay.
Yep. So the bond counsel was Gilmore and Bell. Stiefel is the financial advisor you're required to use.
Right.
Well, not them specifically, but you're required to have a financial advisor on those issuances.
So are there ongoing associated fees, or that was just the?
No,
No, that's-
it's with closing, they get reimbursed for the work that they've done,
Okay.
part of the closing costs.
And then the only other one I had was just the final payment to King Construction. Just again, reminding that I think our goal is to look at these final payments and job completions on
Yep.
at some type of cadence, just to find out exactly what it was bid at, what it was completed at.
When Public
Find out
Works,
internally what we can do and improve. So.
yes, sir. When Public Works comes for their quarterly report, they'll be prepared to discuss any projects that have finalized during that quarter.
Okay.
So I question maybe the commissioners on the issue we just talked about, the bridge. We did receive the first email from the state saying that the position of KDOT was that they would only support one bridge. I didn't have a chance to talk to Ms. Holtala yesterday. Was it ever clarified where that decision came from within KDOT?
It was not
It was not clarified.
where that letter specifically came from.
Yeah. so-
But since then, they've sent two, I think, other letters stating that that's not their position.
So it is clarified that is not their position at this time.
That they would only support one
They are open
bridge.
to us following through the process as it should be.
And trying to coordinate all of our efforts with the county as a whole. I mean, you know, all of the entities that would be involved in that decision making, the city councils and,
I did see her over there, I just didn't,
KDOT.
that question didn't get asked yesterday.
It did at my table.
I wondered.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, this stuff takes a lot of time, and I think we've got time and, you know, getting support through like Mid-American Regional Council and everybody else. We just get everything lined up and then ask for funding for a study, or who will
Yeah, and I
participate.
think everybody's getting hung up on the funding. You know, they're like, well, how are you going to afford to do this? And it's been my experience that a lot of times projects like this, you never come up with the funding first. You get the plans done and you get it in the queue, laying on the table. And typically, when the funds come along, they pick up the first thing that's laying on the table ready to go. So I think our position needs to be, let's just get this thing, the plans
Scope,
built,
right.
get it in the scope, get it on the radar, get it in the queue, laying on the table, ready to go. And then when the funds, we do figure out funding for it, it's ready to go. I've seen a lot of projects get built just because maybe they weren't necessarily the best idea, but the best idea wasn't ready. So the next best idea was ready, and then the funding came along, so.
That's why it's so important we have County Road 30 design sitting on the shelf down there.
Yeah.
So. Anyways, all right. Any other questions of the consent agenda?
just reminding people that our regular scheduled meetings for the commission have been changed to the Mondays.
To Monday.
To Monday.
The next two Mondays.
The next 2 Mondays as opposed to, we're not meeting on Christmas or New Year's.
I hope not, but if we have to, we have
No,
to.
but I
You
just
took
said
an
that we're not-
oath, if it's on
that-
Christmas.
I said
mean,
that
you
we're
know,
not gonna be meeting
Public
on those
Works
days.
Probably doesn't want to work Christmas when it snows, but they do.
I just said that we had agreed to change that meeting day,
Yeah,
so.
well, how about if it snows on Christmas, we come in and have a meeting because Public Works is working?
Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
We approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussions on the consent agenda? Seeing none. Voting?
Aye.
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 All right. Mr. Van Perry's. are you up next on the approval of the water line agreement?
Mr. Van Perry's isn't. I am. Commissioners, you have before you a proposed agreement for the water line relocation for the Eisenhower project. It involves rural water district number 8. In discussions with the district, it has been agreed that the county will undertake the contracting and design for the relocation of their line, subject to their consideration and approval. We believe that this is advantageous to both parties. It allows the rural water district to have their line relocated in an orderly fashion without undue cost to them, either through engineering or staff time. It allows the county to be in control of the phasing and timing of that relocation so as to not delay the Eisenhower project. I would recommend approval of the agreement.
And it will be on a competitive bid process.
The county always prefers and does practice the statutorily required competitive open bidding process.
Everybody had a chance to look at the agreement, and I've looked at it for quite a
A
while.
few times.
So,
Yes.
Questions here?
forgive me if I'm not picking it up and looking at it now.
Motion.
I'm ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the water line relocation agreement with rural water district number 8.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the relocation agreement? Voting?
Aye.
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 Now, does that
Get
complete
this
all
show on the
utilities?
road.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to express thanks to the Board of Directors of Rural Water District Number 8, present company excluded, for their cooperation in this. They were very helpful, and I think it's a good indication of perhaps the model to be used for future projects.
So,
The answer, though, is no. There's still one agreement that we're waiting on, which is the gas line, I believe.
The county is engaged in negotiations with Magellan Company for a encroachment agreement regarding a natural gas pipeline that currently exists, and our easements will overlay their easements. We believe those negotiations are progressing in a satisfactory manner. It's just that everything on the other side of the table goes through several levels of corporate review before it comes back to us. But we are proceeding. We anticipate that that agreement will be reached shortly.
Do you know if there's actually assets in the conflict of easement, or is it just easement overlap?
There's a line,
There
but
is.
it won't need to be
No,
relocated.
their line will remain in place. It's just that we
Okay.
have to
you're
reach agreement on how to encroach upon their
That's what I was
easement.
getting at. Are we gonna have to move
No.
along?
Doesn't need to be moved, but we will be working over the top of it, so we have.
Okay.
so they're in private easement, and you'll be, the county right-of-way extended into the private easement?
Yes.
Okay. So no relocation, just an agreement that says you can encroach on their easement, or,
The entire purpose of the agreement is to not have the line move.
okay.
Because that's huge. That's probably 3 months different.
Well, when he said corporate, I mean, are they slower than government?
Well,
In
you
some
run into some
cases.
bureaucracy when you
Apparently.
get into the Fortune 100.
Okay.
They're pretty good
Okay,
size
so
operation.
doesn't sound like that's a big deal.
Your Director of Public Works and her staff have been moving this along. It's going in a satisfactory progression, so it should be completed shortly.
Okay, all right. All right. Thank you, David. All right, we're ready for the county appraiser, Mr. Weber.
Morning.
Morning.
I have 4 disaster relief abatements. I'm asking you, on a resolution. I'm asking you to pass a resolution to approve these 4 abatements. The first 3 were destroyed by the tornado and was prior to August 15th, so they qualify for an abatement for the 2019 tax year. And then the other one was destroyed by a fire, and it was after August 15th, so it qualifies for a tax credit against next year's taxes, according to the law, KSA 791613. So that one we'll track it and then we'll process it next year when it comes through. So it's the same, basically the same as the other. I've got the properties listed on the sheet there as all the other properties that I brought forward prior to this year. These four were the May 28th tornado, or three.
Mr. Weber, you need a separate motion for each tax ID?
I've got the resolution here,
Okay,
board order,
okay.
and
Board order
So we can do it through that.
Allow it.
8.
Well, I didn't know if we had to do both.
Yeah, no, I just was.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Weber on any of this? Pretty simple, what we've been doing in the past.
It's not the first one.
Nope,
It's the right thing to do,
yes, it is.
so I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve board order number 2019-8, making certain findings regarding the application for abatement of property taxes on certain homesteads damaged by tornado, as provided by the county appraiser.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the tax abatement for these homes?
What will be the process? We talked to the legislators yesterday about potentially at the beginning of the session that they might abate the outbuildings. What would the process be? These taxpayers would then have to come back to you with an application, or how would that work?
It depends on how the bill's written. If the bill's written so it's retroactive back, then we'll have to figure out some way. I'll take all these that I have, we still have records of them all, and maybe we can just process the ones we know, but there are probably some other ones out there we may have to contact.
Is that possible?
I don't see it being retroactive.
That was only if
Really
it's
don't.
retroactive. If it's not, usually it takes, if it passes here, it takes effect,
Right, July 1.
July 1
Yeah.
that
Well, that's
year.
what had been talked about with the.
I mean, it'd be great if it could, but I don't think I've ever seen that.
Budgets and everything, I don't think you could.
Commissioner Culberson, it could be made retroactive, but I anticipate any abatement's going to be made prospective, and that would be acting from that
From a
time
certain date
forward.
forward. I
And
mean,
hopefully we'll never need it.
I like your optimism, it's going to be successful right out of the
Well,
gate.
that's what
Yeah,
some of our state representatives have indicated, that they're gonna try to get it
That'd be good.
right away.
It's
And-
ready to go right after.
That's,
May have to
and,
be attached to something, but.
and as far as whether it's retroactive or not, I think that's something we need to follow up on probably.
Anyways, okay. Any further discussion? Any other questions, Bob?
No,
Then voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, we're ready for Council on Aging. Linda?
Good morning.
Morning, Linda.
The first thing I would like to present to you is the request to have Anita Krondak be appointed to the Wyandotte Leavenworth Advisory Board. She's a 39-year resident of Leavenworth County, is very interested in senior issues, and is willing to attend the meetings on a monthly basis.
That's great.
No problem.
Someone willing to donate their time and volunteer, and I think that's great. So, any questions of this, and I'll entertain a motion.
No, Lynn, I was just curious, how many board members are there?
There's 6 from Leavenworth County.
Okay. And there's more from Wyandotte? or-
Yeah, it's based on population, county population.
Okay. So they have more than 6? How many do they have?
I think they have 9.
9, okay. So it's a 15-member board, and appointments, how do they work?
Pardon?
How do the appointments work?
Well, we do it differently. Down in Wyandotte County, each commissioner appoints somebody that they would like to see on the board from their district. And ours is from the county at large.
Okay. That was all I had.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the appointment.
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of Anita Krondak to the Wyandotte Leavenworth Advisory Board.
Have Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? In voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The next is our request to have the chairman sign the notification of grant awards. That goes into 2020. It is an increase for Leavenworth County, the Council on Aging, and our programs of $78,240.
Any questions on the grant?
No, I'm not going to debate.
So there's really not a whole lot to talk about. I hope not.
Good job, Linda.
Yeah, that's great.
I think it's great we get these. I wish we had some of these to sign every week.
Mhm.
So entertain a motion to authorize chairman to sign this grant.
Motion to authorize the chairman to sign the 2020 notification grant awards for 111B, 111C, and 111C2.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the grant application? Voting?
Aye.
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 And our next request is to allow us to put 2 vehicles on Purple Wave auction. We have got the replacement for one of the vehicles. We just received that at the beginning of the month. The other vehicle has some bad electrical problem. It's been at the shop for over a month and a half. We just had to bring it back. I just don't think it's worth repairing, and that's kind of the shop's assessment too. So we'd like to put them both on Purple Wave.
Where did you get those cars from, Linda? Originally, do you know?
Where
You
did we
remember?
get them?
Yeah, originally. Where did you get those vehicles from? They weren't new, were they?
When we got these two?
Yeah.
Yes, both of those were.
They were new?
Mhm.
Okay.
You thought they were the hand-me-downs?
Yeah, I mean, I know they
from the
used to
other
get-
markets
We do have some, still have some
Yeah.
sheriff's vehicles, and I will
Right,
tell you, they've been
right,
very
right.
good. I have no problem because they maintain their vehicles very well, and they've been great for us, so.
Yeah, I just know some of the vehicles you got had 200,000 miles on them already when you first got them, so,
That's what we're trying to get away from.
yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the vehicles to be surplused on Purple Wave.
So moved?
Second.
A motion is second. Any further discussion on the surplus vehicles? Voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda.
You need these right away, Linda?
WyanDOT's anxious to get it,
I'll
so
go ahead
they're,
and sign them here while we're
okay.
cutting through. All right,
We're getting ready for Lauren.
okay, yeah. While we're getting ready for Public Works.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Lauren.
Morning.
This morning I have brought to you 2 separate RBAs, both for bridges under design by Benish. We will start with SH 30. All of the services that we have requested for the supplemental are things that are not originally included in the contract. For utility coordination, bidding services, post-construction services, and geotechnical information. So we are requesting a total to include a 5% contingency of $32,728.50.
Commissioners have any questions on this?
I guess I'm curious as to, and maybe this is through the education of Olson, but why the scope would have been so limited originally? Like, again, to go from a contracted amount of 50,000 and now to increase that amount by another, 60%. It's like, that's a lot of scope differential. I'm assuming it's all necessary and required. I just don't know.
These were
how it was supposed
decisions,
to begin with.
yeah, sorry. These were decisions made before I was in this office, before I was involved with the bridge design decisions. I am not sure what the thought process was, if it was that they would be done in-house, if some of these things were not needed. Things like the post-construction services could have been contracted out afterwards. So I am unclear as to why the decisions were made previously. However, yes, for example, the geotechnical services in the contract originally, it did include that Benish was recommending 2 additional geotechs and that it would need to be coming in a supplemental. Utility coordination, I know previously at times had been done.
Change order, I believe, aren't we?
Yes, yes. So that is the whole goal in doing all of this ahead of time and having the design firm doing it in one foul swoop, that we can avoid some change orders. From my perspective, contracts will not go out that do not include these services in the first place. So you won't be seeing supplemental after supplemental and change order after change order.
Yeah,
If
if
we
we
can
spend more
prevent
money on
that.
the front, we'll save substantially on the back.
And I would rather be upfront and honest with you and let you know initially when I bring you a contract exactly what that sum is going to be instead of piecemealing it out later.
We don't like change orders.
I'm not a fan of them either. They make me up here a lot.
Yeah, I think the actual design work was actually let over a year ago.
Correct.
So, I mean, they've been working on this design it's probably 14 months, something like that. I'm trying
I would
to
imagine so.
go back.
I
So
know-
this was a long time ago. This was before Olson was even
Yes.
engaged. But I think they actually identified the need for the geotech on several projects, which we brought in already, so.
Well, yeah, I know it came up on the Millwood Bridge among others,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So that is, Lauren and I have talked, and she's very much in tune with, let's get this all knocked out in the front end rather than come in later after the fact. But I think maybe some of the hesitation in the past is occasionally we would design a project and then not proceed with it. And since some of these are
Right.
at the tail end of the project, I think maybe that's why they were holding some of it. I don't know, but obviously something that needs to be done.
Well, and I would just hope that, again, going forward, so I realize we're fixing prior issues, but going forward, that we have an identified scope
Yes.
that would not change, and it should be checking boxes relative to a bridge or any other type project. So, okay.
I think we do now.
Sounds like we do now,
Yeah. Okay,
just confirming.
all right. Then I guess I entertain a motion to approve the agreement for Bridge SH 30 with Benish. SH stands for Sherman, Mr. Stevens.
You want to do it since it's your
You
district?
want me to make the motion?
Sherman Township.
I don't want to spend money. Okay, consider make a motion to approve an agreement with Benish for additional consultant services on Bridge HH-30, project amount not to exceed $32,728.50.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Commissioners. Similarly to that supplemental, I have brought to you a supplemental for a group of 4 bridges that have been designed kind of as a whole. Of course, each independent designs, but they were contracted out in one large contract to include similar services, utility coordination, plan preparation, bidding services, load rating and inventory documentation, and geotechnical services. $34,513.75. And within this RBA, you can see that I've been pulling that out of multiple different funds. So that is each split.
Any questions, Lauren? Commissioner Shimke's the only one that doesn't have a bridge in this batch.
You ready for a motion?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion, we approve an agreement with Benish for additional consultant services on Leavenworth County bridges E18, A49, T34, and F46. Amount not to exceed $134,513.75.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the agreement for the bridge projects? Voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Smith, I've got another thing that I need you to sign also, so I'll just come in at the end of the board meeting.
Okay, that'll work. I'll be
And-
signing a lot of things at the end of the board meeting, it looks like.
I'm glad that in the future, when all these things go out for people, for us to get pricing for, that type of services, that it can be done on a truly competitive basis, because, as you guys know, I don't like this.
Thank you, Lauren. All right,
Thanks, Lauren.
we are ready for the Leavenworth County Humane Society. Crystal?
Hello, I'm Crystal Swan Blackdeer from the Leavenworth County Humane Society, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about our request for an out-of-cycle grant to help cover the cost of caring for animals that have been brought to us from outside city limits in Leavenworth County. Mr. Stephen actually suggested that we make this grant request when he visited our former facility, and so after we got settled in a little bit and got some information together, we went ahead and requested that. I appreciate all the contact that I've had from the members of the commission, both to let me know that they didn't have any questions and they were looking forward to the discussion, or to actually ask a couple of questions. And I appreciate Chairman Commissioner Smith coming to visit to see what we're doing and how. So
Has everybody made it out to the new facility yet?
Not the new, I haven't been out to the new one.
we'll make a special invitation and make sure that none of you are there at the same time. No conflict, no.
You still have the yellow cats.
Public, we have lots of yellow cats and black cats and calico cats.
I have a question for Mark on this. This would be coming from our monies that we give like to the, what do we call it? All the charitable.
Outside agencies that we fund.
Outside agencies.
Well, I guess I would think, the answer to that question is yes, you'd have to use it from the funds that we set aside for mid-year requests, even though this is kind of an end-of-year request. But I might state that the services that the Humane Society provide are obviously very wonderful, and we're all appreciative. But animal control services are budgeted through the sheriff's office, and so this request might be better targeted through the sheriff's office as part of the budget cycle, obviously, for going forward. I know this is an out-of-cycle request, but again, animal control services are budgeted in the sheriff's office, so that might be a direction that we might want to consider as far as when we have applications like this.
And that's what I thought when we approved the portion of the sheriff's budget on the animal control. I thought that's what we were approving when we did that. I mean, the sheriff provides an animal control officer and a vehicle, correct? Am I correct, Sheriff?
We have a part-time on-call animal control officer. The intent of the position that was funded this year was in ways of introduction to evaluate what the need was. Our focus is with the animal control position is to address issues related to crimes against animals, animal cruelty, abuse, that type of thing, bites,
Safety.
that type of thing. Not necessarily a stray animal, and that's simply because there is not a resolution in the county which prohibits domesticated
Animals,
dogs
right.
from running at large. In order for us to collect strays, that we're not creating a public safety issue such as running in the roadway, something like that, we need a resolution that gives us the authority to do that, and then subsequently a codes court to hear any violations which may come from that.
Sheriff, it seems like might have been a slight miss even on our part. It's one thing to catch an animal, it's another thing to have to take care of it after the fact.
Absolutely,
Right.
and the Humane Society and laws have been fantastic partners for us. Quite honestly, we would be in bad shape without both those agencies in the county, and the relationship that we have with them is a great resource for us. But what we're budgeted for, I think, is a different item from what they're requesting. I think what they're requesting is the strays that come in from the county, beyond the cities that you currently contract with, and there's nobody there to pay that bill, pay that invoice. We have paid all of our invoices that is connected to a case number, and but it's those who are brought without, connected to a law enforcement case number, where somebody says, we got a stray dog, and they bring it to the society or have them pick it up. Those are the ones I think that's causing your issue. There's nobody there to pay that bill.
So if we, let's say we went ahead with this, next budget process, would that be something then we would want to move into your purview?
Well, it's a two-part thing, because right now, our officer is a part-time on call.
Right.
So you would undoubtedly have to increase the hours or bring on an additional person to cover, say, we're going to pick up strays, to handle that.
And we can
as
always-
right now, our one
There's so much of
part-time,
that.
he's not always available.
But you'd even pick them up now. The difference is residents are bringing them to the Humane Society without
Right.
interference or interaction with your department.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes they call and get a response, but the animal's not necessarily causing a difficulty to the surrounding area, but it needs to be safe, and it needs to have a chance to find where it originally came from. So the residents will bring it to us with or without a case number. And those are the animals that are reflected on the invoice, because the county is being served, not just the sheriff's office. The sheriff made a very good point in that the way I understand his budget is for the picking up of the animals and not necessarily for their care after they've gotten to safekeeping. And that becomes more of a county issue, because we're providing that service to the citizens, because it's the citizens who don't want the animal digging in their garden or laying on their porch or riling up their dogs or going after their chickens. So they bring us the animal, and we then get it vetted and find it a new home, or find out where it belongs and make sure it gets back there and people know how to contain it.
But isn't that rather difficult, given some of the current, well, am I correct that in the county, there is no requirement for any type of rabies vaccinations and such
That is
forth?
true.
So there's really, that is a good way of tracking where a dog came from. Correct?
If it
I'm-
comes from within city limits,
Right,
then
you're-
we can
it's-
get it back to that.
Right, but out in the county, it's next to
There's no
impossible to
requirement
figure
for
out.
rabies
So
vaccination.
there's really no way to know who a dog might belong to unless they come in looking for their pet.
Unless they're microchipped or they have a
Right,
collar, a lot of
microchipped.
times people write phone numbers on collars and we can get them back that way, or a neighbor will recognize it.
Right, but I think a lot of times, they don't put collars on dogs if they're allowed to run at large because they don't want them hung up on something and to become,
And
I'm just,
Typically, through a donation through LCHS, they've given us 2 chip readers. So that's the first thing that we do, is try to find a chip to identify who the dog belongs to.
And then it can just go home. It never has to darken our door. It can just go home.
But there is great effort on part of the deputies out there to go door to door as far as they can to, do you know this dog, where does it belong, that type of thing, to avoid, number one, us having to transport the animal, and number two, not put another burden on the animal welfare societies in Leavenworth County.
Well, the two questions I've got, like when you said it becomes a county issue, did you mean including the cities or just a rural area?
The city of Leavenworth has their own animal control system, and they pick up animals and contain them and get them to homes or get them to rescue. So within city limits of Leavenworth, we're not really that concerned. We contract with the cities of Basehor, Lansing, and Linwood, and so they bring animals to us all the time, and they pay their bills, and it works very well.
'Cause
Although contract income is a very small portion of
Right.
what we bring in.
Because the issue I got is typically people don't dump dogs in the cities. They dump dogs in the county because nobody will see them dump them. And for me to say that all dogs dumped in the county are from somebody in the city going out and dumping the dogs, probably not accurate. So I'm trying to wrap my head around is what is the percentage of all the dogs dumped in the county? What is the percentage of the owner that dumped them living in town or
I
living in
don't
the
know
city.
that there's a way we can find.
I don't
that.
either, so I'm just using straight population from the census. So if 4,000 people live in my township and 40,000 people live in town, I'm going to say 10% of the dogs dumped are from somebody in the county that dumped them somewhere else in the county, but 90% of the dogs dumped are probably from somebody in town that dumped them out in the county. So
But
then
the
it
people-
becomes,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
but then it becomes what you're saying, a county issue to pay for all the stray dumped dogs. So I'm all for helping pay for this and getting this problem taken care of. But is it a 100% county bill? I don't think so. The other thing I got is dogs in the county typically run the neighborhoods. I mean, I've got a basset hound, Bubba. He thinks 3-mile radius is his home. So,
He'll be 3 counties over before you can call him back.
but he's been picked up twice. And last time I went to look for him, he's sitting in Dave Owens' living room eating Cheetos, watching TV. So he thinks the neighborhood.
Dog.
Yeah, he, you know. he-
Maybe you should get an invite, let's go.
So, but he's been picked up twice, and it's like, because he was on the road, and people that aren't familiar with how dogs in the county operate, they think he's lost or dumped. So he's not, he's fine. So now he gets hauled, 5 miles away, now he is lost. So I'm just trying to figure out, I agree the county should help pay for this, but how do we go about doing that? And I thought we took care of that with the sheriff's budget. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the right amount
If I could
that we
plug
should be
in two
allowed.
things.
Mhm.
One is the people within city limits in Leavenworth, Lansing, Baser, even Linwood, they have far less motivation to dump an animal than people who have access to no place to take an animal that they want to relinquish. All those cities, if you want to relinquish an animal, you bring vet records, you pay a little fee, you can drop the animal off at your servicing shelter. In Tonganoxie and outside city limits, there's not that option. We try to take owner surrenders when we have space, but for the most part, we have to schedule them out into the future, sometimes 2 or 3 months. But the people in Leavenworth, Lansing, Baser, Linwood, and even the Fort, they have access to a facility that will take their owner surrendered animals. So there's less reason for them to dump them.
Okay.
And whether or not they end up in the county, it doesn't matter because the hazard they're creating is out in the county.
Right.
It's not in town.
But you see where I'm going is.
No, I do. I
You want the
understand.
county to pay 100% of the dumped animal bill. And I'm like, if there was some way we could divide that up, maybe with the cities, I would be for that.
And that's certainly something that I would.
Crystal,
leave
what-
up to you guys.
What is the kind of breakdown in percentages now, if you could, between what's picked up in the city versus how many animals are picked up in the county? Just total volume. I'm not trying to track where it originated.
No,
Just
no. I can tell you that 63% of the animals that have come to Leavenworth County Humane Society this year so far have come from outside any city limits in Leavenworth County.
Okay.
63%. That's 170 some animals to date.
Any
And I
particular?
agree. I mean, it's clearly a problem.
Oh, they're from all over,
And-
all over.
And the challenge is where, again, where they originated versus ultimately
You
where
just
they were
don't- you
picked up
don't
and brought
know.
in.
And some of them go home, and some of them, nobody claims them. Or if we can contact an owner, the owner chooses not to claim them.
But right now, we're not asking any of the cities to pay for any of the dumped animals that were picked up in the county.
Not in the county.
Okay, that's my point, is I think 90% of those came from town, just from experience. So I don't know the percentage or the exact numbers, but that's just
But
kind of
I don't
how
think
it's
we'll ever
always
find
worked.
that out.
How many dogs are we talking about?
How many dogs?
Yeah, I mean, how many?
Well, I can tell you-
Are you counting dogs and cat, I mean?
Dogs and cats.
Okay, how many total animals are you talking about?
223 last year. This year, it's closer to 280. And by the end of the year, we'll probably hit 300.
Close to 3. So, like, what about
And
the year
we're about
before?
evenly divided dogs and cats. It's about 50/50.
If you go back 3 years, though, was it like 180? Has it been trending up the last 3 years?
It has been trending up, but it's difficult for us to make a really good judgment on that because we've only been operating a shelter since August of 2016. I would say that with our increased visibility now, we're probably going to see an uptake in 2020. We'll just see. We'll see.
So
We're
if we
new enough
lose-
in sheltering to be able to say, this is what we're seeing so far, but it's difficult to predict. I wouldn't say it's going to decrease.
So if we use these resources that we're talking about right now, we're talking about, like, there's historical societies, and there's, somebody else is probably not gonna get some money from when we decrease this. So I guess what I'm getting at is, are we gonna see this increasing? Is this gonna go from 15,000 asked this year, like, it maybe 20,000? Do you see this as ballooning as an expense?
I don't know that I would call it ballooning, but I would say that probably the county's budget goes up as time goes on. So you'd probably see a like increase in expenses for CASA and the Council on Aging and roads and grounds and
No, it's-
everybody, you know.
I don't see this as a new problem. I think we're just newly
We're just
addressing
newly
it.
addressing it.
Because, I grew up on a
Right.
farm, and growing up, at least 6 dogs we had growing up were dumped dogs, that we had, so,
Yeah, and out in the county, our dog Buddy, he just
showed up.
roamed.
And to your earlier point, though, I mean, there's dogs that are being picked up in the city that, came from the county.
From the county.
Right? So, I mean, it does go both ways. I'm coming at it a little bit different to say, more often than not, people don't realize that the budgets of the collective cities far exceed that of the county, where in most cases, that's pretty unique. Like, that's a problem that we're trying to work through. So I think about like an LCDC and some of these other groups where they put together a formula where funding is allocated and broken down and addressed either by population or total budget size. So if you look at, the total budget of the cities and the counties being 140 million, and we make up, 40% of that, let's say, seems like we could maybe come up with some kind of model and work with the cities to say, hey, look, you can't track what came from the county, and I can't track what came from the city. But ultimately, it's a problem we want to solve collectively.
And whether
If
you
we
use
go
the
to an
formula-
allocation model and think about everybody's respective budget, that would seem to make a lot more
And
sense
I'd
to me.
be happy to provide input to that, but that is something that's completely out of our realm
have
to
two
coordinate.
shelters.
I mean, I can talk to Steve and see if he has any suggestions for what to offer. I did want to mention, there is a county resolution, I think it's 1993-26. You probably know it. It does allow the sheriff's office to impound stray domestic animals. It doesn't require them to do so.
How many strays do you pick up in the cities? Do
We
you know
get
off the top of your
12 between Baser, Lansing, and Linwood.
Well, it should be
It'd be the other
37% of that number.
37%.
37% of 223.
Right.
Okay.
But there is a resolution that allows that, doesn't require it.
Does that typically come into play in just certain cases? I mean, you wouldn't bring a stray in unless it was an extenuating circumstance, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Or if the animal's really in danger, we've gotten them that way too. If they're ill or injured or freezing to death up against a
Yeah,
barn wall.
if they're in need of care, they're injured, presenting a danger to public health, that type of thing. Yeah, that's
If it's
typically
a
when we
vicious
pick up a
dog,
stray.
is that a case where you would take it into custody?
Absolutely. Or work with the dog owner and try to come to some type of resolution. Yeah, we're first always going to try to find the responsible party and work through the problem with them, have them take responsibility for it.
Do we have any fines associated with do we have any fines that are associated with responsible parties, like not keeping track of their animal? And
I don't believe so.
is that something that we could,
We don't have that
Look
because
at-
we don't have like the sheriff was saying, we don't have an at-large animal
Right, but if- I
ordinance.
mean, if we're
You
gonna
can
be
allow
in-
your animals to roam.
right, but if we're
It
going to
only-
begin to do this type of funding, if we're going to begin to pay a per day, what breaks out, or a lump sum to do that, it seems that somehow we might also be able to create a venue for recovering some of, when we can identify where an animal comes from, or if there is an animal that is being neglected or abused or whatever, that as a county, we can begin to look at what do we do to disincentivize people doing that. I'm not saying letting them run and play, because, I mean, that's what
Well, to
dogs do.
clarify, neglect and
Right.
abuse, those are crimes, and that's a whole different
Okay.
argument, so that doesn't really, or intentional neglect or intentional abuse. So that's part of my.
Do
my
we get
budget.
those,
We cover
do you
that
work toward
piece.
getting those prosecuted? And I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Okay.
But one of the things, Crystal, this cost is from animals that aren't claimed.
Right.
Because the people who come in and claim their animals, who they can identify, they pay for it.
Oh, they
pay
do.
a vet bill.
Right,
And
so.
do pay the bill.
We don't always charge them boarding, especially if it's a short period of time, but we do ask them to pay the vet bill.
So, but is a portion of what you're asking, though, for that boarding from animals that were
We've had
reclaimed, or
very
is that?
few
only for the
animals
non-claimed?
claimed by owners that came in from outside city limits. They mostly are the city animals where people come and claim them.
So even with a penalty, it wouldn't do any good because the animals are unclaimed for the most part, so who would you put the penalty on? So, and I think the county counselor was saying to me that, and sheriff is very much aware of this, that any fine that we do levy, we get to keep like $5 of, and the rest goes to the state.
Right, well,
So-
I was just, I'm just trying to, but I'm also thinking that somehow we need to me, I just find it appalling that animals, all animals in Leavenworth County, domestic animals are not required to have the rabies and those, that at some point,
Only
there
those in the
needs,
cities.
yeah,
The
only in the
rabies vaccine
cities.
is a state requirement. isn't
No.
it?
No, it is not.
It is not unless an animal comes from a licensed animal facility under the Kansas Department of Agriculture. If you go buy a lab puppy from somebody in the Walmart parking lot or your next door neighbor, they don't have to have any vaccinations at all.
If they're out in the
Nothing.
county.
Nothing, unless you have it in city limits. It's not a requirement.
So, I mean, it sounds like
But if
that's,
it comes from a breeder or a
Right.
shelter or a rescue, it has to have at least rabies vaccination.
But see, I'm just
So
saying
that- that's
somehow
a
that's a way of
different
tracking.
conversation.
But that's
Understood.
also a way of tracking animals that have been abandoned or have been, or out in those circumstances so that you can,
If they have a tag. If there's no tag and no rabies number,
Right.
you can't, there's no information about whether they've ever been vaccinated in their whole life.
then maybe they need to make
So,
a
Crystal-
decision if they tag or if they have microchip when,
is there not a way to even look at the fee structure, for example? And so I don't know what the percentage would be, if it's, 20% of the animals overall are claimed or whatever it ends up being, like the fees associated with those that are claimed going up to help offset the cost of all of those that aren't. Because most people, when they come and get their dog or cat that they've lost and loved and it's a family pet,
Very happy.
generally speaking, they'd almost give you their car. I would. Right, so is there a way, I'm just thinking, to maybe look at some of those fees and structures and find creative ways of saying that, again, it was generally by accident, but there was still a fault of how probably most of those animals got lost or picked up. Should those fees not be associated and/or be higher? Where it sounds like sometimes we may not even be assessing a fee for boarding, and it's like, well, we've got to
Some of
cover
our
it.
board members are here, I'm sure they'll bring that up at the next board meeting. 'Cause
Uh,
we've been talking about our fee structure.
I was just going to go the opposite way, though, because how do you determine whether a dog you picked up is a dump dog or just roaming the neighborhood? And so if you pick them
Whether
up,
somebody looks for it or not. Or it could have, any dog that, any animal who comes into us, we always assume first that they're lost and an owner is looking for them. That's the route that we go first. If no owner comes forward to look for them, then either they got separated from their owner and the owner wasn't able to locate them, or they were dumped. We can't assume they were dumped. I don't like to think that there are that many
So just-
unkind people who will take an animal out
But-
that they've cared for.
but just a
and then
hypothetical.
leave it.
But just a hypothetical, say you had a basset hound that was crossing the road and some high school girls picked them up, brought them straight to you, didn't knock on any doors, didn't ask anybody in the neighborhood, just took them straight to you, then you would charge the owner when he finally figured out that you had them to pick them back up?
If a basset hound, a purebred basset hound came into us, I would assume they had an owner. I would get that animal's picture up on social media. I would be checking the vets to see if they knew who had basset hounds, because we don't get purebred basset hounds. So I would assume that somebody's gonna be looking for that dog.
But then there would be a fee for them to pick them up from you?
Whatever vet care we provide.
Sounds
I
like
mean,
it
but
was
Jeff,
a
you-
crime, though, your dog got stolen.
It's just hypothetical.
I understand.
Ah, if they picked it
Dog
up
got
on his
stolen.
property.
but
If
there's
they
no.
picked it up off his property and the animal had no identification, there's no way for them to know where to go look for the
So
owner.
Jeff, maybe to fix your point is when you start finding people that bring in animals, in general. Maybe they'll stop picking them up if they're in
Yeah,
the right or wrong
Is
place.
he
Yeah.
microchipped?
But
no.
We can fix that.
But even if
Tell
he's
him I can
microchipped-
microchip him, and he'll go straight back to your house.
But there'll still be a charge.
Not with us. We'll let you pick him up.
Do you give rabies shot, like in that case, rabies shot would be something you'd just, part of the treatment?
We do rabies, feline viral respiratory complex for cats, and rabies and distemper parvo for dogs on intake because it's a better choice for our shelter population. If we don't vaccinate on intake, we're subjecting ourselves to outbreaks. We can't do that. It's a minimal cost to pay for protecting the health of the entire population. So almost as soon as they come in, if we can't identify an owner, we take them to the vet and get at least those 2 basic vaccinations done so that our entire population's more healthy. We can't do rabies at the facility because we don't have a vet, but we can do everything else.
So you got your basset hound
Hypothetical.
taken care of?
Hypothetical.
Then I'll charge you for the rabies vaccine.
Hypothetical. He's actually vaccinated.
Question for the county councilor on the authority of the county. Do we have the authority as a county to require rabies vaccination? Is that a
That's what I
home
was
rule
asking.
power?
Commissioners, you have very broad powers with respect to public health and safety. I believe you probably could adopt a county resolution requiring vaccination. I would suggest that you study that issue before. It's come up. Sheriff Dedeke and I have been dealing with this since well before you probably can remember. At the same time, it is an issue as the county grows and the population in the rural area grows and the difference between the urban and rural areas shrinks or diminishes. This is an issue that's going to have to at some point be addressed. But I think you could do that under your broad home rule powers for public health and safety.
So I think that maybe should be on a work session or something down the road, that we should talk about it.
There were 2 positive rabies cases in Leavenworth County in 2018. I haven't looked to see 2019. One was a bat, and one was a skunk. But, the more animals who roam, the more they can be exposed to the wild animals.
Right.
Well, it seems like minimum, we've talked a lot about on some other things is minimum requirements, and it seems like having your animal
Vaccinated just
for
seems to make
rabies
sense.
is a minimum.
Okay.
Well, I realize animals roam, and depending on where you live, that's more or less, can be a lot more acceptable. But I'm like, every other animal we require you to fence and keep in. So cattle,
Cattle, goats.
pigs, goats.
I don't know about keeping them in.
Well, that is,
They're out
I mean,
a lot.
let's not go into Kansas fence law, because
Yeah.
we could spend a lot of time.
Oh, as long as they're not being a nuisance to other people or causing a public safety hazard, it's not, my neighbor's dogs are on my porch half the time.
Sure, I get out with it.
They have a bromance and, we just say the boys are here, but it means I can't use my front yard. My dogs are in the fenced yard in the back when they go outside. I don't use my front yard for dogs, because the neighbor's dogs are there. But they're good neighbors and I like them, and the dogs are pleasant, they don't tear anything up. It's just one of the costs of me living where I want to live, in the
Right.
county. But my dogs are in a fence in the backyard.
And, I have probably a dozen of my neighbor's dogs roam across my property daily. It's almost like routine, 10 o'clock in the morning, if
They
you're
have a
there.
plan.
Yeah,
They-
and there's a
Right.
path. There's actually a path,
In the snow, you see.
you can see it.
Yeah.
Well,
And
they're
unless
actually the
they're-
happiest dogs if they're loose.
Yeah, and unless they're killing chickens or pigs or, bothering the kids, it's not a big deal, but.
Well,
What
can
do
we
we wanna
all
do with
agree
this?
that these are 2 separate issues, that the sheriff, what we've approved funding for animal control, the sheriff is providing that service, so this is a separate issue. Can we all agree on that? That this is a,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there was, I think that Sheriff Dedeke also indicated that that's kind of like one of those, we didn't think about, okay, we picked the animal up, now what?
well, we knew this was, we were just trying to phase into this
Right.
when he presented his budget with that.
And we're very grateful for that. We've worked very hard on the relationship with the sheriff's office and with Mr. Berry, and I have no complaints at all. We're trying to get the bills paid and make sure things are done well, but he knows I will do what they need.
Right.
We'll do what they need.
And all
So,
of this
Chris,
came
is
out
this-
of a
is this more of the
situation that
aging?
actually existed, so.
Is
went
this
back
more of like a, like?
6 months, 9 months ago, so I think it was,
These are existing invoices that cannot be paid or more forecasting future expenses based on what you know?
Well, the way I wrote the letter was requesting $12,000 to cover expenses for this year, which I just talked with the sheriff out in the hallway before we came in, and the latest invoices are being paid. So it's not $12,000 that we're asking for. We can ask for $12,000 for this year, but we're not short that for this year, probably more like 11. But the future request, until we can get into the budget cycle for next year, was $15,000. So I saw on the agenda that it was listed as 15, but we were asking for 12,000 for 2019 and 15,000 for 2020, just based on a projected intake.
And I feel like since this is
That's
all
whether or not
new,
they're through the sheriff's office. That's for the county as a whole.
and I feel like since this is relatively new to us, you know, maybe it was unprojected what we needed, but I don't want the sheriff to feel like we're going around him. And if, you know,
That's
I'm all
why I
for
sent
it.
him the letter at the same time I gave it to
Right,
him.
and I'm all for paying, you know, the county's fair share of the dump dogs, if that's the actual issue. But I don't think every single dump dog in the county should be on the county's bill. So I don't know how to figure that out, whether you go by a dollar amount, you know, per capita, like Commissioner Shemke wants to do, or population, like I was suggesting, I don't know, but.
And
if-
whether, wherever they came from. If
Yeah.
they came from Peoria, Illinois, if they're on my property between Basehor and Tonganoxie, that's where the problem exists.
Yeah.
So that's where the need
Mhm.
exists.
So, Mark, if we did this 2019 budget, where would that money come from?
Well, from the funds that, again, we've set aside for those mid-year requests, the 2020 request really needs to be, you can't pay for the 2020 request out of the 2019 budget.
Right.
It has to be paid for out of the 2020 budget.
so we need an amendment to the budget. It would,
So,
It wouldn't
No.
require,
Somewhere else.
it wouldn't require an amendment. It's expenditures that are the next year aren't allowed to be paid for out of the current
Right.
year. So and we have funds next year set aside for mid-year requests as well. And I think like Commissioner Stephen pointed out, it just means that somebody else isn't going to get that money.
and I have a question, how much do we have remaining that is at our disposal for mid?
Carry
mid-year?
over 2019.
Yeah,
Say
for,
the 38.
We have between $37,000 and $38,000 remaining under BOC contributions that you can use before the end of the year that was funded in 2019.
37, you said?
37.
38.
Okay.
We'll just
I
say
mean-
38,000.
We've spent, you have $50,000, we've spent $11,600, so you have that remaining balance.
so,
Okay.
We do spend most of our veterinary care money in Leavenworth County.
and you were saying for 2019 was 12.5 is what you were asking?
12.
12 even.
But you think it's closer to like 11 with the actual.
Right,
expenses.
right, with the latest money that I just learned about today from the sheriff's office.
And then.
So we
if-
could, sorry,
Okay.
we could make a motion on an amount not to exceed, say, 11,000, but also as a contingency that we figure out a funding source that isn't solely the county's responsibility and a shared expense model with the cities, because there's,
However you guys want to do it, but we do have contracts with Basehor, Lansing, and Linwood. So they're already paying their invoices for animals coming from within their jurisdictions.
Right.
But not dumped in the county.
right.
They don't need to dump them, they can
Which is
bring
why I
it
think
to
we
us.
also
Yeah.
need to look at having a vaccination type of a policy so that we can begin to figure out a way of tracking where these animals are coming from.
What happens when the call originates in the city?
That'll
Who
be a
picks it
work
up?
session on the whole.
Within the city of Leavenworth?
Not the city of Leavenworth, you said they're self-contained, so.
Basehor
Lansing,
has
Basehor.
animal control, Lansing has animal control, Linwood uses.
So each of them have an
different
animal
people.
control as a
Right, they
part
have
of
somebody
their
that brings
police
the animals to
force,
them.
okay.
So
Yeah,
if we.
and they take owner surrenders from within their cities. They charge the owners a fee, and then we in turn charge the
Because we
city.
also have another shelter in Leavenworth County, correct?
So if we moved ahead today and we did the 11,
Operation Wildlife.
and then we had a work session
Then
on
there's
all
also-
these issues
There's laws.
and
then
figure out
there's
what kind of fee structure to move forward
County
with,
Humane Society,
would that be the best
which is where
way to proceed?
Does the Sheriff's Department exclusively use the Humane Society for bringing the animals to when they're picked up?
No, we also work with laws.
See, that's,
Okay.
I'd say probably the majority of them go through your organization.
right, I just was, we're probably going to be approached again, so that's why
Well,
I'm
Laws
trying
doesn't
to.
have a shelter.
Oh,
Laws has no shelter.
okay.
So they would have to, it would have to be a smaller number because they're going into foster care.
Sheriff, how many
All right.
months has it been since you put on your animal control officer? You haven't made a full year yet, right?
The funding began in January 2019. I believe it was March when we brought Mr.
It's
Berry on.
March. Okay.
And he's very accessible. I have no complaints about Glenn. He's really,
Right.
he's good to work with.
Okay. Do you see that need to be increased? Did you kind of hit the mark where you wanted to be on your budget on that, or do you think?
Budget-wise, as far as the animal control service line item, the taken up and boarding, I believe that we're just under 1,000 remaining in that line item that we can spend. Personnel-wise, that's part of a different budget,
Right.
and we're fine there.
Mhm. Okay. So, okay. Just trying to figure out what we're going to have to do in the future there.
Well, and part of that,
We can divide this.
we'll look at this year's activity by
Mhm.
Mr. Berry and our calls for animal control and adjust our budget accordingly, or our request accordingly.
Okay.
So for now, can we kind of divide this request into half and address the request for the 2019?
The 19,
And then.
well, that's all we can.
Yeah, right, and
That's
then
all
take, you know,
legally,
and
that's
then
all
come
we
back
can do.
for the next year's,
And I would also request, in addition to just figuring out a model that we might be able to better partner with the cities, is maybe looking again at the fee structure and figuring out ways that all of the services that are currently being provided might be able to help cover some of those costs as well. So-
let's bring the, kind of look at the question of having.
Right, because
requires-
can anybody even estimate me what the revenues generated are
For the
from,
different cities?
no, for reclaimed animals? So the fees.
Oh,
that-
yeah, I can look at the budget and tell you how much we've taken in for animals that are returned.
Right, so I was going to say, if it was $100,000 a year, again, I'm making up a number, it could be $10,000, I don't know. That's why I was asking. It'd be easily to figure out, what it would take to adjust that number up, whether that's 50% or 100% or some amount to address the
Normally,
11,000.
we just ask them to pay us what we've invested in the vet bill, because that's our immediate cost. We did $49,000 so far this year in veterinary care.
Right.
That's our biggest.
And I'm not being critical, but as a 501c3 and a charitable organization, I would challenge more of them to think a little bit more business-like, because some of these problems can be fixed internally.
That's why they don't let me be the treasurer.
Fair?
I can see that. But on your deal with the city, I think maybe some of the argument you may get from the city
They're already
is
paying
that
theirs.
city residents also pay county taxes.
Mhm.
So I can see where that could be an issue being brought up. But, if any of you haven't visited a new facility out there, I think they've got a great place to have a big summer fundraiser and picnic out there. They've got a nice big open area.
And we have hot and cold running water now,
Well,
as of yesterday.
I just assumed
And we love
that, but-
picnics.
Okay, but one at a time. You have to schedule your time.
Now, we can go if we,
We
if.
can
Bring
two at a
Becky,
time.
and then we
Yep.
can have everybody.
Yep.
One.
Heart attack.
And for any of those in attendance or obviously
You just got
watching, you will
volunteered.
happily accept donations at any time. correct?
Always happy to
Always.
accept donations.
And volunteer applications.
Yes, our volunteer coordinator. Or leftover campaign funds. Just, you know,
I didn't know there was
if that
any
comes up. We take leftover campaign funds gladly.
Crystal, did you guys get any of like I know they brought in a bunch of animal food with the tornado relief. Did you guys end up getting any of that through the?
I don't
Humane
know
Society?
exactly how that was distributed. I think Lawrence Humane Society got a lot of food, and they were helping in Linwood quite a bit. We did not get a bunch of food. We tend to shy away from donated food because the animals, we try to keep them on a consistent diet. It's not an expensive diet, but it's consistent. It means their stomachs are healthier and we have less mess to clean up. So almost all of the food that's donated to us, we take to the Lost Pet Food Pantry and allow them to distribute it to people who can't afford to buy food for their pets. We
Okay,
don't
what kind of
keep it.
pet food do you take donations of?
Yeah, we would rather have $10 than a pallet of dog food.
Okay, I just didn't know if you had
Because I can't
any.
take dog food to the vet and pay the vet bill.
Okay.
That's our biggest expense is the vet bill. So.
Yeah, because what we had that night, a whole trailer load and couldn't get it unloaded.
That's I remembered that when you were talking. I was just thinking, I wonder whatever happened to that
All
dog
that
food.
dog food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Petco Foundation, it probably, I would say it got distributed throughout.
It came from like Joplin, Missouri or something.
Yeah, it was a semi-load.
It came a long way.
Maddie's Fund does that stuff, Petco Foundation, PetSmart Charities. Yeah.
Really?
They're very, very good with disaster stuff. We still have one dog that came from the tornado at Linwood.
Just one?
Just one.
I don't think we can turn that into FEMA
No.
and get reimbursed.
She's a good dog, she just doesn't like
Okay.
other animals.
All right,
You adopted out the 2 yellow cats from Linwood? They got adopted out?
Yes, oh yeah, that litter of cats, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's,
All right, well, we got this request in front of us.
Do you have
Anyone
anything
any other
else?
questions? Sheriff, we appreciate your animal control officer and what you've done in developing that program. So what, does commissioners have any
I just want to,
ideas on the request from
we just
Leavenworth?
need to look at the 11, I make a motion that we approve, we say 11,000 or did we want to, $11,000 to be used from the
BOCC contribution line item.
BOCC contribution line item, $11,000 for the Leavenworth County Humane Society request.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 And we'll see you next year.
Merry Christmas.
Come visit before then.
No, okay, I will.
I gotta come back again? Anyway,
Then we have,
we have CASA. Kelly?
Mark, can we make sure that Crystal and anybody on her staff is included when we ultimately do have that work session?
Sure.
right, that's what I said, but we need
Yeah,
to,
another work session.
It's not till.
How are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good morning.
morning.
I'm Kelly Meyer. I think
Or Kelly, sorry.
everybody knows that. I'm the director of the CASA program for Leavenworth County. Want to introduce a couple of my board members that are also here, Heather Green and Steve Meyer. We had one other board member here, but he had to leave for an appointment at 10, so I apologize, he's gone. I am here this morning because we have requested $12,000 from Leavenworth County. We are trying as an organization to be very proactive to address a situation that's recently affected our budget. We had a regular funding source that we anticipated would continue to be a regular funding source because over 10 years it's not swayed, and because of different circumstances that have affected that organization, it's kind of trickled down and affected us. And so it is affecting 2 years of our budget at a deficit of $12,000. And so it's actually about $12,500, but $12,000 is what we feel will get us to the point where we can breathe and we can take the next 6 months of our remaining fiscal year at our organization to be able to address that issue. And we're not having, we're not panicking right now. I don't want it to be perceived as though we're saying we are going to shut our doors if we don't get $12,000. That is not the situation. But we are trying to be very proactive to address this issue and make sure that collectively our staff and our board have an opportunity to figure out how we're going to address this for our next budget year and not have a skies falling moment. We want to make sure that we can continue to offer the services that we've been offering. The demand for our services has not dipped whatsoever. In fact, the increase in our services is what we've seen over the last year, and so we want to be able to maintain all services, make sure every child that our program serves is seeing the best quality service possible, and that we can plan for this shortfall and make sure we have accommodations in our budget to include that, while also addressing the need to increase our services for the additional kids that we need to serve. In the last year, we've experienced in one program a 44% increase of the number of children that we have been required to serve because of the referrals to us, and we are the only service provider. And then we have also seen a 25% increase in one of our other programs. As you know, we have 3 different programs where we offer services: a child native care program where we work with the court for assigned advocates, Child Exchange and Visitation Center, and our Child Advocacy Center. So all 3 directly affect and impact abused and neglected children in Leavenworth County and make sure that those services are available to keep those kiddos safe and to make sure that they're being heard in court. Questions for me?
So Kelly, this is, the 12,000 is, what proportion is being allocated to the shortfall in 2019?
5,000.
5,000. And the difference being for 2020 forecasted expenditures. Now, the county increased our funding, committed additional funding for 2020. So this is above and beyond that, because I know your guys' demand has increased substantially, which is actually quite scary, so.
Exactly. So our organization's fiscal year started in July. So
Okay.
we're 6 months, at the end of this month, we'll be 6 months into our calendar year. So we are already into the year that's affecting, if that makes sense.
Right.
Your budget year's July?
July 1 to
July
June
1?
30.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly, I appreciate you coming before us, as probably the only board member here that was here when the Alliance went out of business. I had to find out about that on the street. So, not that you're going out of business or anything, but
You're
I
not.
just appreciate you coming here.
Being proactive
and being
is better than
proactive with
being
your
reactive.
anticipated shortfalls.
And we want to make sure that we are being very open and very honest with the situation. We are facing, it's difficult. We're a nonprofit and we do not have we don't have a huge amount of contingency money. And what we do have, we have out because we're waiting for grant reimbursement. So it is not an easy place to be. $12,000 makes a huge difference in our budget. It is significant and substantial. So moving forward, like I said, we are not in jeopardy of closing our doors. That is not where we're at right now. But we are in jeopardy of having to cut back on services if we are not able to figure out how to address that. But I can assure you, I have an amazing board of directors. We have a wonderful staff, and we will make sure that this shortfall is addressed. But giving us some time to address it strategically and make sure that we're planning appropriately is a much better way for us to be successful.
Kelly, thank you for educating, us individually and independently of kind of what's going on. Would you be open to a proposal where we immediately address the 5,000 shortfall and do so this calendar month, and then have another meeting in 2020 specifically talking about those needs? Because in all reality, I'm concerned that the 7,000 that you're projecting isn't close to what we need based on the small increase that we made and the demand and increase that you've seen as an organization. So I think I've got some other ideas of how we can find some of this funding. We've been talking about it, so I'm thinking next fall I've got a pretty good idea where we can find several $1,000s as just an example. But I'm not opposed to what you're requesting. I'm just curious if it's enough, and I'd rather look at that 2020 and address the immediate need.
Right. So, no, I'm not opposed to that, but we are, the $5,000 is what we are already out of our 19 budget year minus. And then we're half through our second budget year, so that's $7,500 that we would have anticipated. We should have already received half of that.
Okay,
So it's the 5 plus half of the 7.5.
okay.
7, that we're actually, at the end of this year, calendar year, that we're minus in our budget.
Okay.
So the and I haven't gotten over there to visit.
That's
you guys
okay,
yet,
that's
but,
okay. Don't come right now, it looks like the North Pole exploded.
Is Santa Claus there?
Thursday, it will clear up quite a bit, but we have a lot of Christmas going on, 100 kids this year.
If Santa Claus is there, I would like to come. So,
Well, we can find you a suit.
well, all various counties have CASA organizations. Is each one separately incorporated?
Yes.
Okay.
In Kansas, every CASA program is its own 501c3, or it is part of an umbrella organization that is a 501c3. There's 23 programs in the entire state of Kansas right now.
Okay. And you
And I have
guys,
5 counties, so definitely not a one-to-one.
you guys have a development director then that works on fundraising and that kind of thing? Or do you?
Looking at it.
That's all you? It's all you?
So, first of all, as a board of directors, we certainly do appreciate your support. So Kelly does, and we've definitely been in awe for many, this is coming on my 3rd year, I think, on the board. And she certainly tries to be frugal about our expenses, and the board certainly backs her. The office runs our Night at the Races, the largest of the fundraisers, and then the board mostly runs the superhero run, and we instituted that 3 years ago to create a revenue source for a shortfall that we had, and we don't want to have to keep asking for money, but Chad, I do certainly appreciate, I think that the board would entertain that conversation for sure. We know that the ask, and it was certainly not easy of Kelly to ask for an increase. I think our history has kind of indicated that she typically doesn't like to ask for more, but as a board, we have the same concerns. We're not sure what the future looks like as far as how many kiddos are going to be impacted by this, and when the court says we need to help, we want to help. But if it becomes an issue that we don't have the resources, we don't want to be the ones to say no.
Well, and that's what I was going to bring up. I had a conversation with the entity that shortened your funding, and they had a big issue where they lost a lot of revenue. So that trickled down to many different departments, including yours. And my goal was to figure out, is this going to continue? Should we look for this problem next year? And they said, no, they've actually fixed the problem, and you guys will be back to funded what they've been funding you before. So if we can just
I'm not
cover
sure if
what
that's
we got.
correct.
They said they're pretty sure, they're not positive, but the money that you've been shorted now, though, they said they can't go back.
Right.
But my guess is, or my assumption is, that amount that's been committed has been fairly flat and has been for a number of years. And our
Yes.
services are not flat, and the need is substantially more, and that's the larger.
So
There
that's
hasn't
the
been
big
an
unknown.
increase in the
Yeah.
budget allocations.
Yeah, so what I'm hoping for is that what they had told me is correct, and that they will be back to funding you guys next year, but we don't know. But we do know how much you're short right now. So, they can't go back and fix that, so that's kind of where we're at. So hopefully we won't have to cover this again next year, because hopefully that funding will be back in place.
And our intention is not to ask the county to fund this next year. Our intention is to be able to find other revenue sources. We are grant reliant, as most nonprofits are, and we are also very strategic, I would say, and creative in our fundraising. And so using those tools in our toolbox to make sure that we are finding ways to fund our programs and our services that is not constantly, dear Leavenworth County Commission, will you please do this, is very much a goal of ours. We do not want to do that. And we are incredibly grateful for the funding that we receive from Leavenworth County. We would not be able to do what we did without it. There is no question there. There is no question there. This is a way for us to breathe and get us to the point where we know that we're going to go into this strategically and figure out how we can shore this up without panicking.
Any other questions of Kelly?
No, I think it's incredible what y'all do, and on the
It is.
resources, it's quite humbling. And anybody that hasn't toured and that doesn't know anything about your organization should reach out. So I hope that more people do.
It's one of the best organizations.
There's events out throughout the year that you can go to. They always have good food.
Always.
The night of the
We are always
races
in
is
need of
fun.
volunteers also. We are
Yeah.
always in need of volunteers. Anything from advocating to a kid to running a vacuum, literally. There is not a thing, there's literally not a thing you cannot volunteer to do. We even have people come in to clean. There's present wrapping going on. There is lots of present wrapping.
A lot.
You said you had a 44% increase in one part of your program. What part was that?
That was in our child advocacy center. We had a 44% increase in just the number of forensic interviews we did.
Which is a vital service in our county.
Okay.
I would make a motion.
For everybody that doesn't know what that is, go ahead and Google it. So.
Question for the county clerk.
The
You
only
said
thing-
we had a fund that was 38,000.
Just went to
And we
14.
just took 11,000 from it.
3711.
12,000 more.
Yeah, it just went to 14 after this.
But it's till the end of the year, so
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
have the
this is-
funds.
Jeff's
We
like,
wait
you got
for
2 more
motion.
meetings.
Yeah, true.
I move that we make a one-time contribution or allocation to First Judicial District CASA in the amount of $12,000.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or any more questions of Kelly? Seeing none, voting?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being proactive.
And Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
I'll see you.
Yeah.
And those board members that attended, thank you for coming as well.
Yeah.
Yes, thank
And
you.
we certainly would, Chad, I think that's, numbers aren't necessarily my thing, but certainly if we can help in any bit in coming up with long-term, the services are sadly just going to continue to increase. I don't-
Please continue to inform us so we can get the word out whenever you do have an event, so we can get that. And we'll remind everybody that if they have some extra money at the end of the year to write you some checks, we'll accept donations.
Always.
Certainly do, and the
And
community
volunteers.
certainly rallied this year with Luxury Networks doing the matching. That was a fantastic
Awesome.
event.
It was.
We did.
That's good. All right, well, thank you, and
Well
thank
done.
you for
Good work.
everything you do.
See you Thursday.
Yes.
I'm bringing the cookies.
We all gotta quit eating.
Dessert. I got dessert.
Okay, we have any other business before the board at this time?
One thing I was going to ask, and I thought maybe it made more sense to do at the end than the beginning,
Okay.
is the 152 discussions that we had at the legislative breakfast yesterday and we continue to have internally. I'm of the opinion that we're going to continue to run up against questions with these stakeholders as to the scope and the amount, albeit we gave them a proposed number that I think to be credible. I think they very much want to see the actual scope, an actual amount, and then how we might propose, payment of it. So in order to do that, which seems backwards, we have to basically, my recommendation would be for us to approve to fully fund up to the amount that we've discussed so that we can actually go to bid and find a firm that can give us the scope and the detail. But as a part of that proposal, it would absolutely be with the intent that we would go to those stakeholders that have been identified and ask them how much of it they'd be willing to cost share after the fact. So that seems to be the most logical way forward based on all of the conversations I've had.
And would this
Internally and
be,
externally.
would this be just getting the cost of doing the feasibility study or the feasibility study?
So we have a defined scope, which I could have brought, at least one that we think would answer not only all of the questions that have come from the stakeholders, but would at least answer the viability and start to give us some actual cost of the project. And while that would still be high level, it would be a hell of a lot closer than we are today. And then you could maybe start looking at what a larger scale, full-blown due diligence and feasibility study, which would likely be 6 to 7 figures in all seriousness when you talk about the size of project. But this finds out if that's even a logical next step?
I feel like that would bridge the gap between the positive outpouring that we have for this project and the other side of the table of the people that aren't really taking this serious. I think that would answer the people that think this isn't really that serious. It would cover a lot of their questions and make them realize how serious this really is and how many people are behind this.
So I think that us, as the county taking the lead, I think it's, I feel very confident that we would be, as discussed before, that we would get as much as half of this expense cost shared, but to get them to commit with so many unknowns is impossible. So I think it's in our best interest to commit, which we had discussed earlier, which is likely a, $50,000 study that has.
Which doesn't even begin to cover the cost of a true feasibility study.
Right, right. However, I've got a pretty good set of scope that's been provided that I think.
Do you?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So I think that what Commissioner Shimke is referring to is that due to cash basis law, we have to have a commitment to fund a project or proposal before we can actually solicit for that proposal. Now, after we receive the proposals, we're not necessarily obligated to go through with them if we're not happy with what we receive. It's just that we can't go out and blue sky something. We're not allowed to do that
right.
for budgetary reasons. So we had previously, the board had given verbal commitment to $25,000, and we believe that $50,000 gets that gets it moving forward, and then that allows the staff to go out and solicit official proposals that you could present then to the cities.
And coming out of the 2020 budget, where's that line item, or what's that?
Well, one, you have discretionary spending in your budget for 2020 with some, like what we just spent for 19, you have that same funding available, except for it's fully available. We haven't obligated any of that yet, so you would have that money. But I think hopefully we wouldn't end up with any more than the 25,000, because I think once you get the proposals, maybe some of these communities then can at least see for sure that's their commitment. But even if they don't, I think it makes sense for the county, based on our previous discussions, that even if we got zero contributions from these other communities, that it would make sense for us to go forward and get that initial scope.
And to be clear, if this group doesn't believe that the scope of what's being provided for the amount that we're talking about is credible or would get the cities and other stakeholders to engage, then I wouldn't support approving it. But it seems silly we can't even start to solicit from these firms, get that scope defined, get the details that everybody's asking us without fully committing ourselves. And I do feel confident that we can get it done, and I do feel confident that with those answers to the questions that the municipalities and other stakeholders have asked, they would happily cost share. So.
And I was impressed yesterday with visiting with the legislators, the understanding that they have of the fact that the population has so shifted on the other side of the river that this would benefit our community and create economic growth like we've never seen.
Okay.
So I would like to make a motion that we approve an amount of $50,000 to not exceed $50,000 to solicit bids for the feasibility study of the 152 bridge, with the understanding that, again, we will review, we will make sure that the scope is credible, and upon approval, the next step would be to approach those stakeholders for a cost share.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I just have one question. Can we do that, make a motion to do that, to commit funds out of the 2020 budget? Or should it be better we wait till after the first year to make this motion?
Well, I think that certainly we can get started drafting the language and get it prepared, and then before we actually submit it for solicitation, we'll bring it to the board to approve. But this gives us the authority to move forward, at least getting that right.
Okay. Just so we're not
That's
violating any cash basis laws.
That's a good point, that we're not obligating funds from 2019 for a 2020 project, and we're not obligating 2020 projects yet because that budget hasn't kicked in. But this will give us the authority to at least draft what we're going to send out for a solicitation and bring it back to the board.
Okay.
And we'll do that first thing in 2020, and you can formalize the budget at that time as well.
All right. Any other discussion or any questions on it? And voting?
Aye.
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 All right. Is anything else before us? Commissioners, got anything to report on?
Yeah, I do. The Tonganoxie City Council meeting, I attended that, and I
Okay.
went to their legislative, they had sort of a legislative
Right.
preview, and a lot of the things track along, a lot of things we're doing. And I shared what the county's priorities were with them. I did receive 2 text messages on the day of the storm, congratulating and thanking the county road crews.
They did a
for
good job.
What a great job they did. And
They always do, but
well, it's always nice to have good feedback.
It is.
And, because you don't always get good feedback, and that was a wonderful thing.
I will add to that Chief Farley with Fire District 1 commented that, again, obviously they were out and about in the storms, and they could not commend the county enough for the job that was done on all the county roads in comparison to our counterparts.
there you go. We're not going to go
Who will
there.
not be named.
Wasn't gonna say that.
No, they do a great job. Anything else? Mike?
Oh, I have my town hall and potluck tomorrow night, so I look forward to that.
All right, I know Commissioner Shimke made it to LCDC last week.
No, I didn't.
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I
okay.
went. I
You made it.
represented.
All
I
right.
made it.
That's right.
I made it.
Okay, so that was the announcement that you gave us a deal on the American Royal announcement in Wyandotte County.
Yeah, no, I had
Okay.
shared, meanwhile, next door.
Okay,
It's
well,
just a story.
I'm sure we will see some economic overflow for that.
Hope so.
We're hoping
Hope
so.
It's
It's
too
a
bad
good
it wasn't
thing.
across the highway.
I know.
But it just
so
stayed
close.
home where it
Close, but
was.
I
I mean,
still
it
think
has
we will
this-
see an economic
yeah.
benefit.
I
I think
agree.
that there will be a benefit to it, especially given the
I
specific
think-
location.
I think that's a big win and a very exciting opportunity for, we'll call it the region, not just
Yeah,
the
Right,
adjacent
it's the
counties.
region.
So
Right.
that's great.
For
So we-
especially Baser area.
Yeah.
And
And I went, okay, did the LCDC, then City Commission meeting last night, which was an interesting meeting, and I thought was one of the exciting things, and I'll put it out there that they are have under consideration a special use permit for Alzheimer's, dementia day program for the individuals, for the family members to be able to receive a level of respite, and then for the individuals living with dementia or Alzheimer's to be able to have some place to be able to actively engage in social activities, art, music, all those kinds of things. The SUP is asking to use property that belongs to, which one of the churches? One of the Catholic. St. Cashmere Parish. It's on the corner of Pennsylvania and Second Avenue? Broadway, that's it. And so I think that's really exciting because will be the first
there's a need.
facility of that type located in Leavenworth County, and they intend to serve all the residents of Leavenworth County through this program. So I just thought it was really cool.
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. And, well, like I said, we all went yesterday.
Yeah, we all
and
went yesterday.
I forgot my eyeglasses yesterday. So
Yeah, me
there
too.
wasn't no reading.
And it was dark.
And it was dark in there. I am so sorry. But anyways, and then after that yesterday, I went to the Mid-America Regional Council meetings yesterday. And went to the Planning and Zoning Commission Board Member Appreciation Dinner last night. It was a pretty good turnout. I'll go into Baser City Council tonight because they moved it up because of the holiday next week. And I think Fairmount Township will have a board meeting tomorrow night also. And I did not make the Baser Chamber Commerce Christmas party a couple Friday nights ago or something. And they announced, I was told they announced Diana Weaver as a Citizen of the Year, the director of the library in Basehor. Perfect person to be the city of the year. I don't know if any of you have ever used the Basehor Library, but that is a really nice library. They have a lot of programs for the youth in the summer and programs throughout the year. They have meeting rooms there. If somebody wants to use a meeting room to meet somebody down there, it's just a great library. And she does a great job of running it. I couldn't imagine anybody being, you know, her being the citizen of the year that is most fitting for her. So. And I think that's about all I got.
Commissioner Shimke and I attended the fire.
The district?
Trustee meeting
Yeah,
on.
the board meeting on Monday. One of the discussions that was had that I wanted to recommend is Fire District 1 would like to start doing quarterly reports like most of our other outside agencies. And I thought that was a great idea to keep us apprised of, again, what they're doing, what kind of resources or help they might need. You know, it sounds pretty exciting that their ISO rating is improving, which was positive to hear.
Yeah.
So, but I think getting them into the mix to report and help improve communication, not only with the county, but also the cities, is ultimately everybody's goal. So that's good.
And then I'll go to the Lansing Council meeting tomorrow night for Commissioner Shimke.
Okay.
We thought it was last week. We were wrong.
Oh, I forgot, I did attend the Council on Aging deal. I
Toured the
toured the
facility.
facility
Yeah.
and shockingly got to meet all the board. And,
Employees too.
but they are very interested in meeting the rest of the commissioners again because they have some things they want to communicate with all of us.
Okay.
Quite a group.
It is. They do a great job.
You're
Did you
welcome to
sign up
come.
for Meals on Wheels while you're there?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. You're close. All right. All right. Okay, so.
I
You
just
have
wanted-
anything, Jeff?
I just want to pass along that I got probably half a dozen texts, calls, or emails about how good of a job the county shop did on the snow removal. That's surprising. That usually doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't.
So I was pretty surprised.
Yeah, a lot of times it's like working in lost luggage, right? It's never a good day.
Right.
I call them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel so bad. I go in and ask them how they're doing. How you doing?
Yeah.
Appreciate you. So,
Okay.
That's great.
And if we don't have anything else,
Motion.
motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Moved.
All right, voting, aye.
Aye.